I am here with a good friend of mine, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and she is a geriatric certified specialist as far as physical therapy goes. And she also is amazing at weight loss. So she particularly specializes in helping people optimize their movement, optimize their diet, optimize their lives to help with weight loss, because weight loss can play a huge role in osteoarthritis and also just other chronic conditions. So she's in the realm of health prevention or health, chronic disease prevention and helping you live your best life with a primary focus on weight loss. And
Yep.
today we are going to be talking about insulin resistance, which can have a very large impact on osteoarthritis pain, which is why I want to talk about this today, because we need to know and we need to delve into some of these details so that you can learn if you are insulin resistant,
Yep.
because you may be without even knowing, and figure out what we can do then to kind of help rein that in and rein in your joint pain. So I'm going to have Dr. Morgan just kind of go over her introduction, and then we're going to dive into what insulin resistance is. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about you and how you got into this and how you've just started with weight loss.
Well, thanks, Alyssa. I'm really happy to be here with you. People may not know this, but there are not a lot of physical therapists in this online health promotion space. So I've appreciated just your support and your friendship over the years. I think that you're growing a really important thing and you're building an important community. So
You are
thank
too.
you for your work. Yes, I'm Morgan. I live outside of Plattsmouth, Nebraska. Big Cornhusker football fan, even though we are terrible year after year. I'm married to a farmer, so we're right in the thick of harvest. And we have 2 kids. What I do, because working in geriatric physical therapy, I see every day the effects of poor lifestyle choices. And my story really happened or started, I guess, a few years ago after I had my son, and I'd mulled over different things about geriatric physical therapy. And I had my son, and I had gained some weight, obviously, and I was struggling to really lose the last 10 to 15 pounds. And so I experimented with myself. I was my own guinea pig. And I realized that much of what I thought about weight loss was wrong. I realized I was chronically overeating hidden sugars that were in foods marketed as being healthy. I realized I was undereating protein and undereating healthy fat. And more importantly, I found books like The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, and he also wrote The Diabetes Code, which is fascinating. I realized that insulin is at the heart of not only weight gain, which was what I was struggling with, but also diabetes, osteoarthritis, dementia, heart disease, so many of the conditions that I see and treat in geriatric physical therapy. And I thought, that is so interesting, following the breadcrumb trail path back to where it starts, which is truly with insulin and insulin resistance. And there's a clear and direct path to all of those conditions that I just mentioned. So what's really cool about this is we can stop thinking about, how do I lose weight? How do I prevent diabetes? How do I lower my blood pressure? How do I improve my joint pain? And you can filter it down to a single question of, how do I keep my insulin low? So we've all heard, when the tide comes in, all the boats rise. Well, the tide is insulin. And when insulin comes down, everything else normalizes. Your glucose goes down, your HDL goes up, your triglycerides come down, your visceral or abdominal fat comes down. Typically, we lose weight, which is great. We can talk a little bit more about how insulin actually controls your body weight. And your pain comes down. So you're an osteoarthritis specialist, you know that inflammation directly causes pain. When insulin resistance comes down, inflammation comes down. So what a lot of people falsely assume is that weight is completely controlled by energy intake, calories in and calories out.
Yep.
And what I like to say is your body is not stupid. Your body is lazy. And it uses these things called hormones to automate every process that it possibly can. That's why we don't volitionally control our heart rate. We don't volitionally control how fast we breathe, how fast our skin grows, how fast our hair grows. All of these things are controlled by hormones. Your body weight is no different. Your body weight, your body fat specifically, is controlled by a hormone called leptin. There are receptors in your hypothalamus, and it's a tightly regulated process between about 3 hormones. Insulin, if I said leptin, I'm getting to that, but insulin, leptin, and ghrelin. So insulin is really that fat thermostat hormone. It's your fat creation and storage hormone. And so what happens when people try to crash diet, when people try to lose weight by reducing calories and exercising more, is they are telling their body, oh, okay, now we're going to give you 1,200 calories a day to work with. And so your body uses hormones to slow down processes that are not vital. So your metabolism slows down with these crash diets, and research has shown that it stays slower for 6 months to 4 years. And that's why people often regain even more weight than they lost. So it's really not about losing weight. It's about keeping it off. And it's about doing it in a way that's healthy and sustainable. And the simplest way to do that is to live a low insulin lifestyle. So that's really there are always long-winded answers. I only give long-winded answers to the simple question of kind of how I got started in this space of weight loss and disease prevention.
And I mean, it's so interesting because there's so many old school ways of dieting, and so many people are frustrated because they're trying all these different things. And it's not from a lack of effort, but maybe they're trying the wrong things and focusing on some of these things that they don't even know these consequences, drastically under eating or overeating the wrong things and doing these crash diets because there's all sorts of new things coming out. And it's important to think about that a lot of times, like if you don't have diabetes, you don't really think about insulin.
I know.
And I know for a while, and I've been doing a lot of research on my own too about insulin from the stuff that you put out as well. But it's so interesting to the fact that even if you don't have diabetes, insulin can be so, so, so crucial. And this is a lot of what's coming out in some of this new weight loss research. And there's lots of researchers working on this to figure out and kind of optimize that. And I know that you've been doing a ton of your own research and just working with clients and things. And so first, I just kind of want to show or explain kind of what is actually insulin resistance, and just in case somebody hasn't heard of it or don't know about that. So we'll just kind of go into what it is at first, and then how you might know if you're insulin resistant or not.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with insulin, and it's a hormone made by your pancreas. It's what's called an anabolic hormone, which means it builds up. And so all of our cells actually will have an insulin receptor. And depending on the specific cell, that will depend on what it builds up. So in muscle tissue, for example, sometimes insulin can be responsible for building muscle, but usually what we focus on is its fat creation and storage potential. Its main job is to regulate blood sugar. Your body likes to keep your blood sugars in a pretty tight range. And there's only about 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of blood sugar or blood glucose circulating in your 5 liters of blood at a time. And so insulin actually has a pretty big job. So what happens is when your blood sugars go up, which is we'll talk about a lot of different things can do, but let's say you have a pop. So you have a pop that has Pepsi, 41 grams of added sugar, okay, in the pop, in the can of Pepsi.
Yes.
It doesn't include the popcorn and M&Ms or whatever else you're eating. That's going to go into your system. So we're adding 41 grams of sugar on top of the 4 grams in the blood. That has to go somewhere, right? Your body has to do something with that sugar to get back down to the baseline. And that is insulin's job. So when blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up and it pushes the blood sugar into storage. Now there's 2 main types of storage. There's glycogen, which is short-term storage in your muscles and your liver. You hold about 2,000 calories of glucose storage in your glycogen. And then there's body fat. We can make endless body fat, right? So that's really how insulin is your fat creation and storage hormone. It regulates your blood glucose. So if we're talking about, I think the simplest way to explain insulin and its role on our health and our survival, it is a good hormone, is to look at someone with type 1 diabetes. So someone with type 1 diabetes, they don't make their own insulin. Their pancreas cannot. And so classic signs of type 1 diabetes is high blood sugar, wasting away, and excessive hunger and thirst. What's interesting is they have ample fuel. They have high blood sugar, but because they don't have the insulin required to move it into their cells sense that they're starving of energy. And that's why they keep eating and they're thirsty and they're hungry all the time, but they can't gain weight. They don't have insulin. Now let's contrast that to someone with type 2 diabetes, who often they say they don't make enough insulin, when in fact they make insulin, but they don't make enough to keep up with the glucose demand. And what's very interesting is insulin can predict type 2 diabetes up to 20 years before glucose. It's just a more intricate molecule. It's a harder molecule to test than glucose. It's a hormone. And so they're working to make at-home tests, for insulin. They're working to make continuous insulin monitors, but the science isn't quite there yet. But we know that, for example, you can have stable blood sugars, right, for years, decades. It's like rust. Insulin resistance is like rust. It takes a while to develop. But behind those stable blood sugars, your insulin has to go up and up and up to keep them stable. And at a certain,
usually measure just blood glucose.
Yeah.
So for those of you at home, they just measure those blood glucose levels she was talking about, not particularly insulin levels.
The insulin behind keeping those blood sugars normal for decades. But you can see them start to go up even though your blood sugar is normal. And then you reach a capacity for how much insulin you can produce. When you reach that capacity, that's when we start to see climbing blood sugar. That's when we start to see pre-diabetes. And for those who if you don't know, if you've never studied this, you might not know, up to 88% of adults are insulin resistant. 88%.
That's high.
We're going to talk about how that's related to the US dietary guidelines, who are made for people who are not insulin resistant. 12% of the population, okay?
Right.
And that's why we don't listen to them if we're trying to lose weight. So it's very interesting. And if you're not familiar with the cutoffs, and if you haven't checked your blood numbers, you need to arm yourself with this information. Normal blood glucose is between fasting, right? So at least an 8-hour fast, 70 to 100. 100's on the high end because pre-diabetes is technically 101 to 125. They'll diagnose you with type 2 diabetes if your fasting blood glucose is 126 or higher on 2 separate occasions. Okay. So when you talked about, insulin resistance, you are insulin resistant if you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. That's a guarantee. But there are other signs that we can talk about. Before we do that, I wanted to really clearly explain the resistance part of it, because it's it's kind of a complicated word, but it's not a complicated concept if you compare it to something that you're more familiar with, such as antibiotic resistance or alcohol alcoholism, alcohol resistance. So someone may have gotten a buzz on 2 drinks, right? But then they continue to drink, they continue to expose their system to alcohol, and they become resistant to the effect of alcohol to the point where they need more and more to feel the same buzz. Your cells can become resistant to insulin when they are chronically exposed to higher levels of insulin, which is again caused by higher levels of blood glucose. And we'll talk about what causes that. So that's how someone becomes insulin resistant, is when they're exposed to high levels of insulin over a long period of time. People in their 20s and 30s typically, I mean, it's becoming more common, unfortunately, but they don't have the diseases that I treat in geriatric physical therapy. They're developing, even Alzheimer's. The research has shown that you can see changes in a female brain around the time of menopause, so about 51, far before you see clinical symptoms. So if you're listening to this, you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you feel like you're overweight and you're tired and you might have brain fog, you have things going on in your system, but you're just not far enough along the spectrum to be clinically diagnosed yet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean it is a complicated topic, but I think I like the way that you explained it, because it is also a long process. And some of the same things like osteoarthritis it takes a while to develop, but there are small things you can do to help either negate what the processes that you've started with the insulin resistance and minimize the effects and all of that. And so kind of before we go into how you know if you're insulin resistant, what are maybe some of the consequences related to osteoarthritis?
As we talked about, all of your cells will have an insulin receptor. And there are 2 cells specifically in your joints that are important for maintaining joint health. Now, the first is going to be a chondrocyte. Okay, that maintains the lining of the joint, the cartilage. And they are responsible, again, for restoring and repairing kind of that surface of the joint, the cartilaginous surface of the joint, so that they can rub smoothly against each other. They can move smoothly. And in order to create that matrix, right, those chondrocytes need to utilize glucose. But when they're insulin resistant, the glucose has a harder time getting into that chondrocyte, the cell, so that it can't make the matrix as well, and it doesn't restore the tissue, right? So then it just breaks down. And the second cell would be the synovial site, and that is the cell inside the synovial fluid, which is like the grease of a joint. And when those synovial sites are exposed to high levels of insulin, they actually ramp up the production of inflammation, and they reduce the production of synovial fluid. So you have more inflammation, less synovial fluid, and reduced health of the cartilage lining your joints. So osteoarthritis used to be considered a condition of obesity, wear and tear on the joints. And I think that's because there's such a strong association or correlation between weight and osteoarthritis or joint pain. But more and more, it's being recognized as a metabolic disorder because of how important insulin is to every cell, to every process in the body. And so those are the main ways that I would say it can impact the joint directly. And then indirectly, it will increase systemic inflammation and pain.
And so I think that this is important to know. One, because if you've been following me for any length of time, we know that osteoarthritis is much more than wear and tear, and this just goes ahead and proves it. And so one of the things that I meet a lot of people who are like, I'm trying all these things, but nothing's working. But then when you go see a doctor, you go see someone in our traditional healthcare system, nobody's asking about this kind of stuff. They're asking about your activity levels, and they're asking about things that are still related to that wear and tear situation and that wear and tear scenario. We're missing out on, are they taking your blood? Are they testing these insulin levels? Are they talking about insulin resistance? No. And
No.
that's why we're seeing kind of a spike in the online world and the online education, because we have so much more access to resources and things
Mhm.
like that. So if you have osteoarthritis and it feels like it like came out of nowhere, or you're trying like exercise and a couple like supplements and all these things, but you're not really seeming to make it anywhere with pain relief, or maybe you're getting a small amount of pain relief, this could be a huge part of your puzzle. And
Mhm.
it's not only just eating well. And that's one thing that I
Yeah.
want to talk about, kind of how, because a lot of times people are like, well, I eat healthy. I, eat
Mhm.
vegetables. I, do all this stuff, eat fruits and all kinds of things, but I can't lose weight, or I'm still having pain.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, first off? And then kind of we'll run through how you might know if you are insulin resistant, or at least be able to kind of identify some of these even early signs.
Sure. Okay. Well, you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, and that's supplements, right? So the glucosamine, like glucose means sugar. Okay. So not surprisingly, glucosamine raises blood sugar, which will contribute to insulin resistance. Same thing with like corticosteroid shots. These are band-aids. They will not fix the problem. And it's very important that if you really want to get better, you need to develop that long-term mindset,
Right.
a low insulin lifestyle mindset. So, not just keep putting band aids on the problem. Actually, before we get to nutrition, just because I'm a very linear person, I want to run over the signs of insulin resistance first. I think that it'll make a little bit more sense. And I pulled them. If you follow my content, I have YouTube stuff too, and podcasts, and
Which I'll
just
put
like,
those links
yeah.
down in the description below if you're on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that
But
way you can see those,
I did an interview with Dr. Benjamin Bickman, and he's the
which is
author.
awesome.
He's the author of Why We Get Sick, and it's the book that I wish I could have written. It's about insulin resistance, and he has a really practical, helpful book if you want to learn more on a dime about how to deal with this. So he has a quiz in his book called the Insulin Resistance Quiz. Shocking. And I wanted to run through that with your audience just so that they can take a mental inventory of, do I have insulin resistance? Is this something that I need to worry about? And again, I've already said, if you have prediabetes or diabetes, you are insulin resistant. Now, as I go through these, if you answer yes to one question, then you likely have insulin resistance. If you answer yes to two, then as Dr. Bickman says, you most certainly have insulin resistance. So the first is, do you have more fat around your belly than you'd like? The next is, do you have high blood pressure? And what that means is, off of medications, okay, is your blood pressure, it needs to be less than 120 over 80. The
Higher.
next, well, ideal blood pressure is less than 120 over 80.
Oh, okay. So if your blood pressure is higher than 120/80, then
Yep,
okay. Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
then it's a yes. Do you have a family history of heart disease? Do you have high levels of blood triglycerides? Do you retain water easily? Do you have patches of darker colored skin or little bumps of skin, like skin tags, at your neck, armpits, or other areas? Do you have a family member with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes? Do you have polycystic ovarian syndrome for women or erectile dysfunction for men? So we can see here it's a very holistic quiz. Again, if you answered yes to one, you likely have insulin resistance. Two, you most certainly do. And you need to pay attention to the rest of the advice that we're going to talk about today. So you mentioned something really, really important, and that is general advice from a doctor, right? They might be asking about your exercise. They might say you need to lose weight. Doctors don't typically study nutrition in depth or insulin resistance. It is kind of It's been around for a long time, but I think because of this online education field, it's finally gaining the traction that it deserves.
Right.
And so if your blood numbers are off, or if your doctor is saying you need to lose weight, but they don't give you more detailed advice, it's probably simply because they don't know, or they don't have the time to do this behavioral counseling.
Right.
That's why I'm here, right? If you want that, you can check out my website. Currently, it's weightlossforhealth.com. Okay. So you can find a lot more resources there. But let's talk about all of the factors that go into weight. Research has found more than 70. Okay. So when someone just tells you to eat less and exercise more, that's like the dumbest piece of weight loss advice in the world. I like to say they're either ignorant or they don't care enough to explain it to you.
Right.
Either way, run, because they don't know, they can't help you solve this problem. So let's talk about, I like to say 4 to 5 pillars. I'm toying with if I need another pillar or not. But the first pillar of living a low insulin lifestyle is nutrition. What we eat. And again, I'll give you all the details, but this is the bird's eye view. Then it's like when we eat, okay, intermittent fasting. And sometimes you can lump those together. Then we have stress. And underneath stress, we can include toxins and environmental things, because those are metabolic stressors. We have sleep. And as you know, we have movement or exercise.
Yes.
All right. All of those are on the foundation of mindset. So many of the people that I help come from chronic dieting, yo-yo dieting, an all or nothing mindset, fear of failure, fear of eating fat, fear of elevating their cholesterol, all of these different mindset blocks that we work through so that we can work to make this sustainable. Because when it's sustainable and it feels good and you're not hungry when you're losing weight and you have more energy and you're experiencing less pain, you're okay if it takes a longer time. And that's something that I'm realizing through my coaching. People expect weight loss to suck. They expect it to be miserable, and it doesn't have to be, but you can either lose weight quickly, probably be miserable, crash your metabolism, and then regain it. That's behind door number 1. You've probably been behind that door about 5 times. The alternative door is to just accept the fact that it has to be a lifestyle change. There are evidence-based things that truly work for long-term weight loss. And you have to be okay with moderation. You have to be, okay with exploring some of your own limiting thoughts and changing your habits. And it's so much more complicated and tender and nuanced. Besides, let me give you a meal plan and an exercise plan that you're never going to do. Okay. So
Exactly.
I wanted to start with
Osteoarthritis is the same exact way. Looking at mindset, and it's so much more than do this paper of exercises. And so weight loss is kind of the same thing. But the good thing about these is if you kind of tackle them together. So if we kind of go through these pillars that we've talked about, sleep and all these pillars that she just talked about, then you'll see that your osteoarthritis pain will actually decrease as well. So focusing on these is not only for weight loss, but also for osteoarthritis and for joint pain and for limitations in mobility and all of that. So it absolutely carries weight, not only just to lose weight, because if you're watching this and maybe you don't feel like you need to necessarily lose weight, or if you're watching this and just kind of want to kind of wrap your head around, okay, where do I start? Like, how can I focus on osteoarthritis and then focus on weight loss? They are one in the same as far as this process that she's going to explain.
Yes. And it's so important to recognize there's no cookie cutter approach. There are guidelines and principles that work for everyone, but not a single approach will work for everyone. And so as I talk, I'm trying to slow down because sometimes I talk fast. As I talk, I want you to just soak it in, maybe re-listen to this interview, re-watch it on YouTube, go check out some of the resources that I share. And then I'm very big on behavior change, habit change. How do we do that? First of all, don't get overwhelmed. Okay. If I'm going to cover some new things, you might feel like, oh my gosh, I need to go change my whole lifestyle. This is going to take forever. It's going to be way too hard. Don't allow yourself to speak to yourself like that. Just say, you know what? That was a lot of information. I'm going to pick this to work on this week, and then this to work on this week. So it's
Exactly.
a constant recalibration of what to focus on based on your own life circumstances, where you're at, how much time and energy you can devote to this. So for starting with the first pillar on nutrition, what's really important to recognize is that calories are a made up thing. There is no calorie receptor on any of your cells. Okay? Your body doesn't recognize a calorie. What it recognizes are macronutrients. And there are three main macronutrients. There's carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And we're going to talk about each of these in depth. Under the carbohydrates umbrella, there's starch, sugars, and fiber. It's very important to even get a little bit more granular here because of how they're metabolized. Starch. What do you think of when I say starch, Alyssa?
Potatoes.
Potatoes. What else?
Potato chips.
Okay, so we're a potato girl. Bread, pasta, rice, cereal, starch, right? Oats are a starch, like quinoa, a lot of starch in that. So they can even be whole food sources of starch. Starch, if we break it down, it's many molecules of glucose strung together. That's all that starch is, many molecules of glucose. Now we're going to talk about sugar. And I'm just going to talk about the main sugar, added sugar. So sucrose is also known as table sugar. Think of like pop, candy, cookies, cake. So that table sugar is one molecule of glucose, one molecule of fructose. Okay, so it's not many molecules of glucose, and that's important. And then fiber is, non-starch. They call it polysaccharides. So fiber actually is good for our health. It slows down the blood sugar response. You do not need to worry about eating too much fiber unless it gives you GI upset or concerns there. So why starch, it's important to recognize the difference between starch and sugar, is because every cell in your body can metabolize that glucose. Okay. But fructose, which is 50% of added sugar, right? One molecule of glucose, one of fructose, that's like a missile that goes straight to your liver, and your liver can only handle so much at a time. And so it's quickly metabolized into liver fat. That's how we get a lot more non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now than we used to see. It's all this added sugar. So if you're picking your carbs and you're like, should I have this piece of candy or should I have this piece of bread? Have the piece of bread because it's mostly glucose and it doesn't probably have a lot of added sugar. But check your bread because some bread does. So those are the main carbohydrates. Breaking it down, really explaining to people what's in your food, how is it metabolized, how does it impact your insulin. Speaking of, I want you to think of a curve, right? So on the vertical axis is your insulin response. On the horizontal axis is the time. When you eat starch and sugar, you have a blood glucose spike, a quick one. And then following that has to come the insulin. There's two ways insulin can get into your cells, sugar, blood sugar. Both are through, this is a little sciencey, but I think it's fun. It's called a GLUT4 transporter. Okay, it's a protein. It hangs out in your cell. When there's sugar that needs to get into your cell, it goes up to the cell membrane, and then it acts like a tube slide. Then glucose can go down into the cell. Oh, different things. Anyways, so I'm thinking as I talk. So the two ways that can happen is insulin and exercise. That's why movement and exercise is so great, because it moves those GLUT4 transporters up to the cell membrane to reduce your blood sugar. So blood sugar can be pulled in by muscle demand, or if you're like a lot of people and you're eating a high starch meal at your desk as you work, you're sitting there, you're not using your muscles. So insulin has to come along, open that GLUT4 transporter slide, and let the glucose go into the cell to be stored. So that's why a low carb diet is so good for weight loss, because it significantly reduces the amount of insulin Again, that's your fat creation and storage hormone, all controlled in your brain, not volitionally. Now, when we talk about essential nutrients, there are things called essential amino acids, essential proteins, and essential fatty acids, essential fats. There are no essential carbohydrates. Okay. I'm not advocating for a ketogenic approach. I don't really think that's sustainable. And I've seen research that shows a keto diet sustained can increase inflammation markers like CRP and your cortisol. So I really like a lower glycemic approach. It's just a little bit more sustainable. If you like fruit and you want to include some fruit or some grains in your diet, it's possible, right? But we have to recognize how those higher carb foods will impact glucose and insulin. Now, protein is the next macronutrient, and there is different quality proteins. So I follow an animal-based diet, not carnivore, not keto. I just eat a lot of animal products because they're concentrated forms of complete proteins. Versus plants, there are like tempeh or soy products that are complete protein. But a lot of them, like the quinoa, you have to eat quite a bit of it to reach what's the minimum threshold that we need for protein. Yes. And so protein has a moderate insulin response. It doesn't really impact your glucose, but I teach about in my program how it still impacts your insulin, but not nearly as much as the carbs. Okay. And it's an important building block for our bones and our joints and our muscles. And it's a really important nutrient. And we are vastly under eating protein. So much. I mean, if you're having a bowl of Special K in the morning trying to lose weight, you're pretty much just pumping your body with a bunch of starch and sugar. And there's maybe a few grams of protein and no fat. It's not helping. It's not helping.
Exactly. And just joint health in general. I mean, you need protein. And I noticed that especially kind of once you hit 50, I don't know what it is, but protein just dramatically declines.
Yep. And your body becomes less efficient as we age. And so we actually need more. Yep. We need more. And so when you're thinking about how much do you need, what I recommend from an ideal standpoint is about a gram per ideal pound of body weight. Okay. So if you want to weigh 140 pounds, aim for 140 grams of protein. If you're combining that with intermittent fasting, that's a heck of a lot of protein in a day if you're eating like 2 meals. So what I say from that standpoint is aim for the minimum. Your body needs at least 25 grams, ideally closer to 30, of high quality protein at a time to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So if you're having like 10 grams of protein from a bar, you're not reaching that threshold. You're not getting the full benefits of that protein. So at least 25 grams, preferably up to the upper end, 55 to 60 grams is about what your body can use at a time per meal. And so
that's quite a bit.
It is, but it's totally doable. Even just doing like 1.5 times of your meat portion size during a meal can really help you reach that goal.
Sure.
So when it comes to protein, recognize it's very essential, very satiating. That's the other thing is the carbohydrates, starch and sugar, they don't trigger your satiety hormones in your gut. That's why we always have room for dessert, even after a big meal, right? So think about Thanksgiving coming up, right? You have your big turkey, you have your mashed potatoes and gravy. No one wants to go back for another serving of turkey unless you're my husband, because his love language is meat. But they'll go back for some pie or whatever they want because it doesn't trigger their satiety. It only makes them feel more full from the stretch receptors in their gut. So that's something else to really recognize is how does the food impact my satiety and how does it impact my insulin? And protein has a very high satiety effect, which is great for weight loss. It keeps you fuller between meals. That's why a lot of my clients are like, I'm full, Morgan, I can't eat anymore. And I'm like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
So then fat, dietary fat is the last macronutrient. And there are different types of fat. We have got to get over the low fat era that I grew up in. When we're talking about unhealthy fats, there's 2 that I want people to keep in mind. trans fats. Look for partially hydrogenated oil on the ingredients list that has trans fat. And then omega-6 fatty acids that have been processed. So soybean oil, canola oil, safflower oil, those are the kinds of oils that are unhealthy. I won't get as sciencey into why that is, but they are. They can increase your insulin resistance in the long term.
Okay.
Now,
that's where fried foods come
right.
from.
Yeah. So it's like when people are like fried, fat's bad. It's like, no, it's not. But unhealthy types of fat, yeah, those can be unhealthy. That's why the fried foods are not very good for our health. I classify saturated fat. I'm starting to move it from my neutral to good, but I'll leave it in neutral to avoid more controversy than I'll already cause here.
Yeah.
So saturated fat has actually been shown as one of the primary nutrients to raise HDL. Okay.
Okay.
So it raises the quote unquote healthy type of cholesterol. So many people have been afraid of eating saturated fat and the foods that have them, like whole fat dairy, beef, delicious foods, the egg yolks, stuff like that, because they're afraid of what it's going to do to their cholesterol. And we have to take a pause here. And I know we're not going to get to everything we want to get to today, but that's okay. We have to pause and explain this cholesterol deal. There's different generations of cholesterol. So we have total cholesterol, all right? Then there's HDL and LDL.
Mm-hmm.
And then under LDL, you can measure different particle sizes of LDL. Oh. And so when someone comes to me and they are concerned because their total cholesterol is up and their LDL cholesterol is up, I say, I don't care. I don't have enough data to say if that's healthy or unhealthy, because we need to look at the subparticles. It's interesting because so if you're looking at the particles, think of like a big buoyant beach ball. Okay, that's going to be pattern A of LDL. It's going to float around the inner blood vessel and not do a lot of damage. And some researchers think it's protective. Okay. Then there's small, dense LDL known as pattern B LDL cholesterol. That's like a golf ball. That'll bounce around your blood vessels and cause the damage. If your LDL is high, but you have a pattern A, I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it. That's more healthy type of LDL cholesterol, especially if their glucose and their waist circumference, their blood pressure, their triglycerides are all in line. You have to look at the complete metabolic profile, not just say,
oh, doesn't hold as much weight as it once was thought to then.
No, and it's like you can't, if your doctor says, oh, you have high cholesterol, you need to start a statin. You need to advocate for yourself, because statins can raise blood glucose and make insulin resistance worse. Okay. So I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not a medical doctor. You have to make those decisions in line. But before you start any medication, do your due diligence and research potential side effects like the musculoskeletal pain I'm sure that you see with patients who have statins, and joint pain. So anywho, back to the LDL. How do you know, right? Because a lot of practitioners, a lot of medical doctors won't necessarily want to make you go through the extra test to find your LDL particles. Well, Dr. Bickman's book has a great poor man's method, which he calls it. And it's you take your triglycerides divided by your HDL, and that gives you a pretty accurate estimate on your LDL size. And if that's under 2, that's healthy. If that's over 2, that's unhealthy. So triglycerides divided by HDL. If it's under 2, you're kind of in the larger pattern A LDL and you're fine. If it's over 2, you're towards the small pattern B, and that's where I would especially take a look at all of those other numbers and see what we optimize. Now, what makes pattern B cholesterol, unhealthy cholesterol go up is added sugar. Okay, so if you want to improve your blood lipids, eat more saturated fat and less added sugar. That's kind of the bottom line of that. Okay. So that's why I really want to do that big old disclaimer on saturated fat for anyone who's worried about how it might impact their cholesterol. And then even more healthy types of fat, are omega-9 fatty acids, omega-6 fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids. I'm going to take some more time to talk about the omega-3s. Omega-6 and 9 you can get from like nuts and seeds and olives, avocado. Those are all great sources of fat. But what we really need to focus on are EPA and DHA, which are a type of omega-3 that are anti-inflammatory and highly bioavailable anti-inflammatory nutrients. So when people come to me and they're like, I'm a plant-based person, I'm like, okay, where are your bioavailable omega-3s coming from? Because there's like an 8 to 15% conversion ratio of the omega-3 fatty acids that are found in plants versus like into the EP, those are ALA versus, and then they go to EPA and DHA. And those are the anti-inflammatory omega-3s found in high concentrations in salmon. So salmon and other fatty fish and green algae, that's why there's such powerful anti-inflammatory foods. They're high in EPA and DHA. So I don't know if you've talked about different supplements for those, but that can be a great anti-inflammatory nutrient.
So a lot of like fish oils and things.
Yeah, I've seen different research on that. I have not studied supplements in depth. I know that fish oil is a popular supplement, and until I do more research, I probably won't speak to that, but I can speak to eating fatty fish a couple times a week. Great for your health. And then if you're going to do a supplement, be sure it's high quality, and then that it's the EPA, DHA.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't like fish, or I don't, especially salmon and things. And so kind of figuring out other ways to get those
always other ways.
omega-3s. Yeah.
And so that's what and fat has the like almost no insulin response. That's why people who go on the keto diet lose a ton of weight, because they're keeping their insulin so low by eating a high protein, high fat diet. But the problem with that is if they can't sustain it, you can actually become metabolically inflexible and lose your efficiency at processing carbohydrates. And so when they start eating carbs again, they're like, oh my gosh, the weight came rushing back on. It's like, well, you told your body to stop processing carbohydrates, so it did, like
right.
Yeah. So that's why I think that moderation is so important. I'm really big on the science behind why something works and explaining it.
Absolutely. So one thing that I know I have heard, and this is kind of a selfish question, but so like if you have something that say raises your insulin level, like fruit, for example, if you pair it with something like a fat or a protein, does that limit the insulin response, or do you still kind of see spikes and things?
It will. So when you have, especially like the fiber with the fruit, and if you have it with fat or protein, that will slow the digestion, which will lead to a lower, more sustained glucose response versus a spike. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have to talk about artificial sweeteners. A lot of people try to reduce their sugar by eating artificial sweeteners. The three that I usually recommend are stevia and erythritol. What's the other one? Monk fruit is another good one.
A lot of people ask about monk fruit.
Yeah, those are fine. So those really don't impact glucose or insulin as much as other ones. Like the one I'd really avoid would be sucralose. Aspartame's been shown to not necessarily impact glucose, but have other health effects. And then maltodextrin is actually an interesting food additive for texture that will raise glucose. So you can be eating a completely sugar-free product that still raises your blood glucose. Very interesting. So
looking at the labels, that especially if foods like say, I don't know, like even if they say like high protein or something like that, does not necessarily mean that they are healthy or sugar free or things. You're not out of the woods yet. And I know I probably just opened up.
Oh my gosh, you have to look at the marketing. I don't remember what it was. I think it was a Gatorade protein bar, maybe. Okay, so it marketed 20 grams of protein on the front, and then you turn it around and it doesn't tell you about the 20 grams. No, 20 grams of added sugar.
Oh, yeah. And they also have very high carb counts as well.
So
It
yeah,
was crazy. Like,
look at the nutrition label and look at your ingredients list and educate yourself on how food impacts insulin and satiety, and you will see weight loss. But that's not the only piece, right? Because so many people optimize their nutrition and still plateau. And so I know that, we'll not get to all of this today. But when we're talking about nutrition, we also have to talk about food timing. A lot of people grew up or have done different diets that advocated for mini meals to keep your metabolism up. Okay. And that is nonsense. Every time you eat, you're stimulating your insulin. And if you're having mini meals, you're probably not reaching that protein threshold in each of those little mini meals, right? You're much better off having 2 to 3 very big satiating meals a day and then not eating for several hours, a few hours, and then have another one. Exceptions would be if you're trying to really build muscle and you want another protein dose after a workout. That can be a good strategy. But another thing is people have, heard that you need to eat breakfast, that it's the most important meal of the day. And I love Cynthia Thurlow. She's an intermittent fasting expert.
yep.
And she has this quote, breakfast is the most important meal of the day to skip. And if you want to lose weight, it's fine. I mean, you will not crash your metabolism. You're going to tap into the glycogen stores that we spoke of earlier in your liver and your muscles. The only reason, people say it boosts your metabolism is the thermogenic effect of food. Okay. That means how much energy are you using to break your food down? So what? You're going to eat 400 calories so you can boost your metabolism by spending 20 of them or 40 of them to digest that food. Come on, you got to think through things here.
Yeah,
And so many of my clients are like, oh, I was never hungry in the morning to begin with. And I just ate because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
exactly.
And a lot of people are afraid of intermittent fasting. You fast every night when you sleep. Like, we don't need to be dramatic about this, okay? Even starting with like a 12-hour fast, that will help
Yeah.
control the nighttime snacking. Here's another really interesting thing. It all comes back to insulin. You can metabolize carbohydrates better midday, so like 12 to 3 versus in the evening. So if you're having some like pretzels or a piece of bread, it's interesting if you I've never done this, but this is from a continuous glucose monitor registered dietitian and Dr. Bickman that I spoke to. And they say that you can see that if you eat that in midday, it has a lower glucose response compared to if you eat it at night. So
Yeah.
you can tolerate a heavier carbohydrate load like for lunch versus dinner. And then there's other little tricks and stuff that I teach to help reduce the glycemic impact of meals. But fasting is important, and we don't need to get into it, but autophagy is a really good benefit of fasting and using up that glycogen. It's not like you're not going to starve to death. It might take you a little bit of time to adjust to pushing back your meal a few hours.
Sure.
But you will. I mean, give it a few weeks. I think that a 16-8, so for example, eating from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is a really sustainable method for a lot of people. Depends on your schedule. So that's another pillar. And then if we're talking about like stress management, huge, because Dr. Fung says stress contains neither calories nor carbs, but it can cause weight gain.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens when we're stressed? So think back to the olden times, a tiger's chasing you or something. I don't know. And what is your stress response designed to do? It's designed to help you fight or flee. It's an acute response and that needs energy. Your muscles need energy. That energy comes from glucose. So cortisol is released when you're stressed. Cortisol raises blood glucose. If you move your body, that's fine. Remember those GLUT4 transporters we talked about earlier? Super. But if it's an email from your boss or a call from a loved one that stresses you out and you're sitting at a desk, not moving your body, then your insulin goes up to lower the blood sugar again. So we have to control stress. I do have my new favorite hack is blocking blue light. So this is fascinating to me, but blue light, which is the primary light coming from devices, or like a computer, phone, TV, right? If you think of the sun at high noon, that's about 50% blue light from people that I've spoken to about it. If you're looking at your screen at 9 at night with no blue light blocking, you're telling your body it's noon. No wonder you're having a hard time sleeping.
Yeah.
You know? And so and cortisol and melatonin, which is your sleepy hormone, work in opposition. So when you're exposing your eyes to blue light, that will raise your cortisol to kind of help keep you awake, keep you focused. And then your melatonin doesn't go up. And that's why, then people take a melatonin, they're watching their TV and then they're taking a melatonin supplement to kind of counteract things, when there are simple fixes. Like you can adjust your screen settings to be more warm. I do that. And then I use these cool little shades. If you're watching on YouTube, these aren't really dark, but they do a little bit. So I combine that with my screen. And then I wear these ones. These are from Spectra. And these block all blue light. It's so crazy. It's so cool.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So sunset to sunrise, I wear these now, and that really helps my sleep quality. I sleep a lot deeper. I've noticed I stay asleep better, so I fall asleep faster. So that's one way, to improve your sleep and reduce your cortisol, your stress at the same time. And it's my new favorite hack, because it's like, oh, you click a button and you get them and then you wear them and you don't have to.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. I have a pair of those, but I've heard that like those clear ones that you're wearing, the brand that I have just from Amazon, aren't as potentially effective like at night. Like I've heard the orange ones are much more effective, like as far as strength and things go. But yeah, that's very interesting, because I know, I mean, I'm even guilty of it, just being like tied to your phone or tied to the TV or iPad or something that can be emitting that blue light, which then impacts sleep, which then impacts cortisol, which then impacts insulin, and thus brings it full.
And it all comes home insulin. Yep.
So, I mean, this pain and weight loss are so multifactorial, and there are so many things that go into weight loss, that go into joint pain. And so when we're putting and hearing these band-aids of, just go to physical therapy even, or just, lose weight is another one. And people get really frustrated because weight loss is hard. And giving those blanket statements isn't going to help. And if you don't know why exercise is helping, then you're likely not going to stick to it. And so knowing
that's so true. Like knowing why something is helping, even if you can't see the results right away. Yeah.
Like knowing this is going to unlock so many doors for you, and you can overcome chronic disease, especially osteoarthritis. You can overcome and prevent a lot of things, heart disease, stroke, all these things, if you can just kind of rein in some of these other lifestyle factors. And even if you feel like you're eating healthy, then you may be spiking your insulin still, and some things may be a little bit out of control, which I think that this absolutely highlights is it's not just one thing, and it's not just, you just have to get surgery. There are things that you can do. Surgery is appropriate at certain circumstances, but there are things that you can do to mitigate and reduce pain. And
it's not just age too. I mean, like there are physiological changes, but I'm over 10 pounds lighter than I was in high school, with a better body composition, like more lean muscle, less fat, after having 2 children.
Yeah.
So it is so possible, no matter your hormonal status, like if you're perimenopausal or menopausal, no matter your age, like you can still optimize so many different things.
Exactly. And this is why people are like thriving on, even just people that, because social media has brought a lot of this to light, like people that are 70 and 80 and, doing like obstacle courses and doing like all of these things, because it's not guaranteed that you're going to break down and that, your body's just going to give up on you once you hit that age. If you rein in some of these things now. So especially if you're, 30, 40, like these are things to start creating habits now. So that way you don't have to deal with this stuff when
Yeah.
or you deal with it at a much lower capacity than you would if these things are uncontrolled, because generations behind us didn't exactly have all this information at 20, at 30, and so we can make real change, because osteoarthritis and obesity and all of these things are being diagnosed at an earlier age. And
Yep.
I think it's funny, somebody came to me and they're like, well, I'm having joint pain, I'm having all these symptoms of osteoarthritis, but I'm told I'm too young to have it. And it's like, it's not like there's an age where these things are appropriate. It's maybe we have some of these uncontrolled things
Yeah.
that are leading to some of these symptoms and things like that. So it's just interesting that it's not just tied to age, and it's not just guaranteed you're going to break down at 60,
Right.
that you can do these things, but you have to rein these things in. But also, it's not too late either. And
Yeah.
that's an important thing too, that even if you maybe didn't have all this health information before, it's not too late to start making positive change either.
Yeah.
And so I think that going through, no matter what age you are, these pillars will be extremely helpful. And I know that you have a lot of resources on YouTube, on your website. So where can people go to find more information about insulin resistance, or maybe try to kind of find ways to get started controlling it?
Yeah. So before I give you that, I had to just give a shout out to exercise, because we didn't talk about that. I know you're huge on strength training, and I just wanted to hammer home to your audience, like strength training is so minute for minute, it's more effective at reducing insulin resistance than cardio. So I think people got on this cardio kick because it burned more
Yeah.
calories in the moment. But when you have more muscle mass, it's like you have more garage space for your cars. You have more garage for your glucose. You can metabolize you can
So then
store
you're
more
not storing it as fat.
glycogen. Yes, more muscle glycogen instead of muscle fat. So anywho, I wanted to plug strength training.
I
Very
appreciate
important. And they can find me at weightlossforhealth.com. And if they Google Dr. Morgan Nolte, I'll show up on YouTube. I've had Alyssa as a guest in the past. I'll probably have you as a guest in the future. Thanks
Yes.
for the opportunity to talk with your audience today. I've really appreciated it.
Totally. And if this was helpful, go ahead and put a comment down below. Let us know if you have any other
Yeah.
questions. And this was amazing. And I hope this was super informative. And Dr. Morgan mentioned in the beginning, don't get overwhelmed. You don't have to make all of these changes at once, or you don't have to look for solutions for all of these things right now. Just focusing on one or two things can be so incredibly powerful for both your joint pain and just your overall health and your weight.
Yep. Again, keep the drama out of it. Don't be mean to yourself. Don't feel like you need to be perfect, because it's all counterproductive, wasted energy.
Yes,
Just,
exactly.
really monitor how you're spending your mental energy, and see how much you're spending on like negative self-talk and comparing different diets. Just like focus all that on like one goal this week, and you'll make
Yeah,
progress.
absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and so much for sharing all of this amazing information. And if you want more information, the links are down below. And thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.